Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Nic and I talk about bad mentors. We interview Marilu Cristina Flores about the film industry, taking bold career leaps, and her nonprofit organization, Conservation Key. And finally, though I didn't get to see any forest elephants, they are pretty fascinating. And by that, when I was in Ghana, I should say, they were only recently described as separate species from the African bush elephant. They're slightly smaller, but have the slowest reproductive rate of any elephant species, reaching sexual maturity at 23 years old and having a gestation period that lasts 2 years. Ugh.
Yeah, I know, right? That is exactly how I read it. Yeah, no thanks.
Poor babies. Okay, hit that music.
NAEP is hosting a special webinar on the NEPA Phase 2 Bipartisan Permitting Reform Implementation Rule on Tuesday, September 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. NAEP is pleased to welcome speakers from the White House Council on Environmental Quality, who will present the recent release notice of proposed rulemaking for revisions to the National Environmental Policy Act. The decision will include an overview of the proposed rule and a question and answer session. To sign up, please check out www.naep.org. Do we have a sponsor today?
Nope.
Okay.
Are you ready to sell us something?
Let's see. Yes. Okay. Yep. I'm ready.
Okay. This is 30 seconds sponsor fill-in spot. If you would like to hear something else, like an actual sponsor, please give us a ring and we'll put you in here instead. So ready, set, go, Nic.
All right, here we go. I know everyone loves camping, right? Yeah, but don't you miss sometimes some of the things that you have at your house? We have this thing called glamping, but we want to take that to the next level. This is called Glamp Kings, and that's right. We're coming to your house and locking all the doors so you can't leave. That's right. You're camping at your own house. That's exactly what it sounds like. You pay us to make sure you don't go anywhere, and that is exactly the kind of process we offer. We know people love their homes. They never want to leave them. We can make sure that doesn't happen. We have, guard dogs. We've got, any kind of sentry that you want, whatever it is. There's lots of different packages, lots of different levels, whatever it is that keeps you in your house and never being able to leave. Glamp Kings, glampkings.com. There we go. That's our sponsor for today.
Pretty sure that went over 30 seconds, but I lost track of the count.
Dang it. I was like, do I have to keep going? I have to keep making this stuff up? Oh my gosh. All right. Well, on that note, let's get to our segment.
Or even just bad mentors too. I know I had a bad case of that at my first job.
Like a bad day? Are we a bad mentor?
Yeah.
Oh man.
It's not very supportive and it made me feel really terrible.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. But
like, how was she not supportive? You were like, I want to do this. And she was like, no.
Yeah, pretty much. I just kept asking for more responsibility. She kept telling me I wasn't qualified to do it, even though I was. Yeah, it just wasn't a good thing.
Yeah, bad mentors is a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever talked about bad mentors.
I don't think we have, but it is definitely a real thing. And I think it's really damaging too, because it makes people afraid to get other mentors.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. I mean, if you don't have a good support system, or it's actually not good, but actively terrible.
Yes.
That can definitely really mess with your career, mess with your confidence as well. And you have to kind of rebuild that somehow. And maybe that makes you feel like you have to be on your own and do things on your own because no one else is going to help you. And, that can get really emotional, really challenging, really difficult. And yeah, man, I'm just realizing that there are bad mentors out there, and I'm processing it because that really hurts. I've been really lucky to have some really good ones and some okay ones. I've never had one that was bad though. That would be really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at what point did you recognize that it was a bad relationship?
I would say pretty early on. At first I thought that I was just being challenged, and this was opening my eyes to a bunch of new things. And then I realized that after I did all the things that I was asked and still never got anywhere with it, I'd say probably around 6 months in, but then I stayed for another 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, giving it a good college try is not a surprise. I mean, I think that, that there have been situations where I've been in similar boats where it's just like, I should be, even I think my transition from one job to the other in my career, I think I probably stayed a year or two longer in the job that I had than I should have, or than I wanted to. It ended up working out okay. I found a great job. But yeah, it's hard to leave because was it your first job?
That's the thing. It was my first job too. So I just kind of felt like this is what I had to do to make it. And it was just a bad combination. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
And it's, because you don't really even understand what the world is like. This is your only experience with it. So you wouldn't even think, this is not good for me. I should go somewhere else. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the problem with bad mentors. People don't realize that that's, if you, get a mentor, they're like, but I've tried that. And you're like, they're not always like that, and being able to recognize when it is a good relationship. But a lot of mentors don't have any training. They're just told you're going to mentor, or they're just put in that role, and it's not even defined. So there's a lot of need, I think, or there's an importance to train, especially a company that says I love when a company's like, oh, we're starting a mentor program. They're like, cool. We're going to make these people do it. Like, oh no, it's like red flag number one. I've seen people been told that they're going to be a mentor who are like engineers who don't like talking to people. You're like, that's just, you can't force it either. There are people who like to mentor and there are people who don't, or don't have the skill or ability, and they're just in their nature.
Yeah. And there's, even when, mentoring programs, that's another good point. I know a very specific story about a mentor program at a company. And one of the people they wanted to mentor had a pretty serious HR violation against them. And my unsolicited advice to the people involved was, if this person is not able to talk to an entire gender, how are they going to mentor anyone?
Right.
Because even if they have their appropriate gender, quote unquote, they're going to be teaching them how to talk poorly to other people. So that person cannot be in your mentor program. And it was like I was blowing their mind. Like, oh, you're totally right.
Right.
Of course I'm right.
Exactly. I had a mentor program I was involved in with 3 men who were meant to be my mentors. And I was like, hey, can I get a woman? I know there's no women in leadership roles here, but can I find someone close? Nobody noticed or cared or whatever. Just like, okay, cool. We got you some mentors. Like, these aren't the ones I want. Thanks.
Right. Well, it's kind of like a relationship too, right? It's a good mentor,
much a relationship.
Mentee should be like any other relationship you have in your life. You have friends and then you have like your close friends, and you have people that you just get along with really well. That should also be the case for your mentors, right? Like, not every person who is in a position of authority is going to be the right mentor for you. And even like people who are good mentors aren't necessarily the best mentor for every person. Nobody is, as much as my ego would love to think otherwise. I'm not the best person for some people, Some people need more or different guidance than you can give. So,
yeah, I never had a situation like yours, Danielle, but I had one. My favorite was the mentor who literally pulled up a website and read off to me 10 things about leadership. I was like, cool.
Okay.
Appreciate your insights.
Number 1, be accountable. Number 2, be extra accountable. Yeah.
Oh, good times. All right. Well, enough Debbie Downer stuff for today. There are kudos to all the good mentors out there doing the good work. If you are considering or have never been a mentor before, maybe get some training. And let's get to our interview.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to EPR. Today we have Marilu Cristina Flores, a marketing and communication specialist, conservationist, founder of Conservation Key, and a producer on the show. Welcome, Marilu.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, we've already been chatting a little bit and having a lot of fun. So let's dive into the questions that we had for you today. So it looks like you went to college for conservation and marine biology, but how much of your work is communications, marketing, and campaigning? And maybe tell us a little bit how you found yourself in this line of work.
Yeah, I have definitely a very strange origin story. So I actually initially went to school for film school. I was very integrated in the film industry at a very young age. At about 15, I started in the film business. Cool. And went to school for film school, and then changed my major, as many people do. Ended up graduating with art history and a minor in biology. And then after 15, 16 years in the professional entertainment industry, working for Warner Brothers, MTV, Universal Pictures, I decided to pursue my second passion, which was always marine science, which then became my first passion and really what I wanted to do. I just kind of got done with the biz, wanted to really just make more content that was made science accessible to people and really engaged folks and got them excited about the things that I thought were super exciting and our marine life. And so it all kind of melded into this second career, if we could call it, where I am a communications and marketing expert. And I'm still actually a filmmaker. I did an award-winning piece a few years ago for the Surfrider Foundation, which I'm super proud of. So every now and then I come out of film retirement to do something interesting if the right project calls to me.
Okay, that's cool. So how would a project like that come to you? Is that literally someone brings it to you, or is it something that you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're like, I need to do this?
That's a great question. It's actually a little bit of both, right? It's a combination. So for the Surfrider project, it was something that they wanted to capture stories of locals that had been impacted by harmful algal blooms in the state of Florida. I was born and raised in Miami, had strong ties to the state of Florida most of my life, and was regional manager for Surfrider in Florida and Puerto Rico for some time. And so that's kind of how that project materialized. But then other projects have come because, I see a story or I find a person that has something really interesting or compelling to say. And then I would just feel like, hey, the audience would probably really benefit from hearing this. And then, I either fund it on my own or find business partners who are willing to come in on the fundraising. And then we just go out and shoot it. I'm very fortunate to be married to a very talented photographer, videographer, cinematographer. He does it all. And between him and I produce and write the scripts and organize the shoots, and he shoots it. So that's kind of how they've come about.
That's super cool. So did you guys meet like doing a film or something?
No, we have a very also interesting origin story. So I actually moved to Vermont for a little while. I had been through a breakup and wanted to change, and I hate cold weather. I'm actually a tropical person, and I'm Cuban Puerto Rican of heritage and descent. And I really wanted to challenge myself. I'm like, I want to go live in the cold and just do something different. And funny enough, through a friend, he set us up on a blind date, which I knew was a blind date, but he did not know it was a blind date. So it was very awkward.
Oh, wow.
And he's half Hawaiian. So he was like the only other tropical person that I ever met in Vermont. And yeah, here we are 10 years later.
Oh, that's super cool.
That's got to be, what are the odds?
Right?
Seriously.
Well, I feel you on all counts, like changing your perspective after a breakup and going somewhere cold after I lived in Florida for 35 years and now I live in Syracuse. And couldn't be more extremely different.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's definitely. How are you adapting? Because I wouldn't be able to do it. I lasted a year.
I've been here going on 7 winters, and which seems crazy, but I'm finding that it's just how long they are gets longer and longer. So I don't mind up until like Christmas. And then after that, I'm like, okay, I got to go somewhere else. So as long as I can get out of here, I'm good.
Yeah,
I feel that.
Yeah. So all these people we've invited in the go ahead. Sorry. Edit.
I was just saying, you did your time, it's like, you're like, okay, I tried 1 year and I'm out.
Yeah. And actually I ended up moving back after he and I got married. And the second round, I lasted 8 months. So almost 2 years collectively. But no, I actually live in the Bahamas now. Florida wasn't tropical enough. I'm like, nope, I need to get closer to the sun over here. So yeah.
That's
awesome. Yeah. Surfrider Foundation. What was it like working for them? Because really most of my experience with them is just from their music, from the Surfrider CDs.
Oh yeah.
So what did Surfrider do?
Oh my God. Surfrider is an incredible organization. I'm very lucky that, I got to be regional manager for just shy of 4 years before I went on to do other things. But I first got involved with them in 2008 because I was living in California, working in the film business. And like I said, I always had this strong tie to marine science and conservation and getting involved in my community. And so I started joining them for some beach cleanups and then started volunteering with their Blue Water Task Force, which is a volunteer-led within the organization, it's a volunteer-led group of people that go out and test the beaches or lakes or rivers to make sure that the water is safe for recreating and swimming in. It's all led by volunteers. There are regional managers and regional staff throughout the different areas where Surfrider participates. So in the United States, I believe they have something like 50 or 60 chapters, which is incredible. So you could typically find one near wherever you're living and get involved with them. But it's mostly volunteer led. They do an incredible job training their activists to learn how to talk to elected officials. And every year they do something really cool called Hill Day. And so they bring all the activists to Washington, D.C., and they give them some training on the issues and bills that are coming up. And they organize all these meetings with our elected. And we get to visit with them in Washington, D.C., in their offices and talk to them about these issues that we're passionate about. And I just think it's an incredible organization that's been around for 39 years. They were actually founded the day before my birthday, the same year. So I'm super stoked. And they just do great stuff. And they also have high school and college clubs. So it doesn't matter how old you are, you can find a way to get involved and get engaged. And they're really great people. Some of my favorite people in the world are Surfrider people.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Like I said, I've heard of them and I know about them, but I didn't know a lot of details. But I have one more question before I hand this back over to Nic. But I career coach a lot of people who are afraid to move from one industry to another. And you seem to have just been bouncing around between film and environmental. And are you just like approaching that as if like, who cares? Or have you struggled with that? What advice might you have for somebody else who is like, especially people who are both wanting to work in arts and sciences?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely scary. So I'll be super transparent. When I told my family that my last 4 years in the business I spent at MTV. And when I told my family that I was leaving that career and going back to school and this is really what I wanted to do, they almost had like an intervention and they're like, Are you okay? Like, what is going on with you?
Yeah.
And so, I can see how it can be really intimidating and scary. And I myself, I always felt like, well, I'm, in my 30s at this point. I am deciding to go into a totally different landscape. I don't have the education that, some of my colleagues may have 20 plus years in school and research and data collecting and things like that. And I realized that I was my own worst enemy. I'm not trying to compete on the level of peers that have PhDs or master's level education in marine science or conservation or research. But I felt that I still had a lot to contribute. I felt like if I didn't put myself out there, the opportunities would never come. And so I think that even though it was really scary, and I definitely had some moments where I questioned if I was making the right decision, I have felt very fortunate in the ability to be able to have been hired by organizations like Surfrider and Greenpeace. And now actually I'm working as a consultant for the United Nations for their Office of Ocean Law. And all those opportunities came because, you know what, I did have a background and experience that some of my peers didn't have, just like they have. And so by putting that at the forefront and really using my communications background, my filmmaking background, and even my arts background, I was able to kind of carve a niche for myself and stand out. And I think that anyone who's switching careers probably has a very similar story. They bring to the fold experience that perhaps their colleagues and peers don't have. And I think use that to your advantage. And I think that's where successful career changes happen.
Yeah. And it's so awesome. And it's such a great way, a great perspective to have, because it's like you're learning new skills, but you have all these skills you've already learned. You already have all this value. And it's almost like, I can understand why a family would be like, what are you doing? But at the same time, having confidence to be like, I got this, I can figure this out. Like, so like, I don't know, what was the thing what I guess let you take the leap? How do you go from film to conservation?
I think that I was in a strange way kind of always at the cusp of both, believe it or not. So a lot of the projects that I worked on when I worked in the film industry were historical type films, right? So they were biopics or behind the scenes type of footage that I was producing. Some of it was also reality focused, but a lot of it just kind of had this historical aspect or storytelling aspect that was based on a real situation or something that was happening real time or had happened. And those were just the stories that I always would naturally gravitated towards. And then obviously living in California, the years that I did, and going out to Malibu and watching the surfers and a lot of the ecological issues that my area where I was living in was being impacted with, I just kind of always thought about it, like plastic pollution and even oil drilling, which, was still happening at the time in California. I think that there was always an intersection there. And so it wasn't a really far leap for me to decide like, oh, I really want to focus on telling these stories. And obviously in regards to conservation, we only have one planet, right? We all want to swim in clean waters and we want good air to breathe. And I think that all of us in a way are conservationists, right? Because whether you have a science degree or are actively working as an activist, these are just basic things that you want for your children or your family members. And I don't know, it just seemed like a very natural trajectory to me, to be honest. I don't know if that answers the question as best as I can, but that's just kind of how it made sense to me.
Or you say you worked in film, right? Or you worked
yes.
And the first thing that came to my mind was, okay, well, on what? And, I'm going to put it in there just in case you're like, oh man, I always get this question. But, I'm curious, what did you actually get to work on? What was the thing?
So one of my first films that I worked on, the film industry, you basically everybody starts off as an assistant of some sort, a gopher, a PA, production assistant. So one of the first projects I worked on was actually Any Given Sunday by Oliver Stone. It was filmed in Miami. It was filmed in Miami. And so I then got an opportunity to work on a lot of the films that were actually filming at the renaissance of the Miami film industry, which was actually brought to us by Michael Bay. Thank you, Michael Bay. Yeah. When he did Bad Boys, everybody wanted to come and film in Miami. And also at the time, the state of Florida had great tax incentives for companies to come and film in Florida. And that kind of led to the Miami and Florida film boom, which no longer exists.
Yeah.
But I worked on that, worked on Any Given Sunday. And then I worked on a film with Denzel Washington called Out of Time that also filmed in Miami. And then I went on when I was at film school, I actually was one of the producers of the Miami International Film Festival. So I did that for a couple of years. I was responsible for this really cool program called the Real Symposium Series. And what we would do is get like A-list directors to come and talk to film students and like host them and just really give them like in film school experience, right? So I produced that for a couple of years. I produced the Made in Miami Film Festival. I wasn't the sole producer on any of these things, by the way. I was part of a team of the film festivals. And then I was very fortunate to be called on to work on a student film by a group of NYU film students called Wet Foot, Dry Foot, which was about the Cuban immigrant policy. It was a dramatized version of exactly that, Wet Foot, Dry Foot, but that actually led us to get nominated for Student Academy Award. Wow. And and so typically in films, it is the producer who gets the award when you're nominated for Best Picture or things like that. Right. And so that then led to a bunch of calls from California. A little Miami me didn't know what to do with herself. And I started getting job offers out in California. And I went on to work on the film American Gangster by Ridley Scott. Yeah. So I helped out on that. I was in a production assistant type role. And then I just kind of graduated into production coordinating and production management. And then I spent my last 4 years at MTV in reality, working on a series of bunch of different reality shows. And just because I moved back to Miami from LA at that time. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell, I guess.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, it's funny that you talk about reality TV in Miami. You could just take a camera and go outside in Miami and you're done. You don't have anything else. You just start walking.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So you have the idea, right? This is the plan. This is what I'm going to do. Like, what were your first steps? Are you like, okay, I'm going to contact these organizations. I'm going to set up an LLC for myself and go from there. Like, what did you do and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So, the first plan is I found a online program that would really help me fill the gap education wise that I felt that I needed to be able to apply for a career or a job, right? Get me to the level that I felt comfortable that I could accomplish and achieve. And the second thing that I did was get even more involved. So that's actually when I really kind of put all my eggs in the basket with Surfrider. I was already kind of volunteering with them when I had free time, when I was on hiatus from a project. But at that time, I had actually moved back to Miami and I got super involved with the Miami chapter of the Surfrider Foundation. And eventually I actually got elected into a leadership role. It was still a volunteer role, but I mean, I really treated it like a part-time job, to be completely honest. I easily put in 15 to 20 hours a week, just volunteering, helping other volunteers out, helping educate people about Surfrider, fundraising, all that good stuff. And then after a few years of that, a staff role opened up at Surfrider. And because of the involvement that I had, the hiring leadership knew who I was. They were aware of some of the things that I had been working on. And then I could also, put that in my resume, like, hey, I've spent, 2 years volunteering at this capacity. These are the things that I've accomplished on the local level. I know how to expand on that. I know the brand. I know the organization. And I became a regional coordinator at that point. And then a year and a half after that, I was named regional manager. I got promoted. And Puerto Rico was added to my roster as well. So yeah, that's basically how I did it. And then, again, Surfrider, incredible organization. They really have a great setup to inspire people, to help their staff get the tools that they need to move forward, not just within the organization, but outside of it. And after some time there, I ended up going to be a communications role at a different nonprofit. Wasn't quite the right fit for me. And most recently, I spent some time over at Greenpeace as a senior oceans campaigner before heading over to the UN, where I'm on a contract role there right now.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, so it sounds like a lot of volunteering is what helped you kind of get your foot in the door.
Yes.
And after that, so you start doing volunteering, you start doing work and you're working with Surfrider. And then to get you where you are today, how did that transition happen? Where you're like, I did a lot of work with Surfrider, I had a great time doing that. And now it's time for me to start contracting with other organizations.
Yeah, I think, for me, I definitely have an interesting story in the sense, I wanted to leave the United States. I wanted to be an expat. It's something that my husband and I had always talked about. We wanted to experience living in a different country. And so keeping a role like the one I had at Surfrider or other US-based organizations wasn't going to be realistic for me, and with our travel schedule and stuff like that. So I started just looking for contract opportunities. Some of the places I looked, the Schmidt Marine Job Board is an incredible place to start. There's also Seven Seas Media. They have a great job board, LinkedIn. Also networking at events, wherever it is that you are, finding where the local scientists or people that do the type of work that you're interested in doing hang out. I've been very fortunate to be a contractor at Investable Oceans for over a year now, just shy of a year. And that's also opened up many incredible opportunities for me. I got to go to the Explorers Club earlier this summer for World Oceans Week. And it was an incredible opportunity to just be there. It's such a cool building with such cool people. And, again, network, let people know what you do. And eventually all of that kind of grew to me having my own nonprofit organization, which is a IRS recognized nonprofit. One of the things that I kept hearing from folks and peers and friends is like, Marilu, why don't you do this? You're so good at this. Why don't you do this? And so a lot of it was actually based on submersible drone surveys that I was doing of our coral reef environments in South Florida. And at the time that I started that in 2019, nobody else was doing it. We were able to get a grant from the Wildlife Conservation Society for the equipment and then fundraise for some additional equipment. And, I think that one of the biggest things that folks are sometimes fearful of, and I totally understand because I started off this way too, is branching off on their own. We all bring such unique perspectives because each individual, right? Like you have your own life experiences and work and college experiences that shape and define who you are. And we all see the world very uniquely, right? And I think tapping into that is really where I have found the most success, right? So from learning what I did with established organizations like Surfrider to, if you have an idea, follow it. If you're able to, see how people respond to it. Talk to your peers. Hey, have you heard of somebody doing this? I'm thinking of trying this out. We're so lucky that we get to live in a world where we have the internet and we get to connect with others and we get to put our thoughts out there, whether it's on Reddit or a job board or some of the conservation threads that exist, listservs and things like that. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? That somebody tells you, oh, that's been done, or I don't know that that's a good idea.
Right.
I think that we have to be open to the criticism to really do groundbreaking and inspiring stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. I know Laura is going to feel the same exact way. So give you a little bit of a shameless plug too. You are the founder of Conservation Key, which is an organization that aims to spread awareness about coral reef restoration. So you talked a little bit about how there are some feedback and struggles and unique opportunities for you all kind of but what's the end goal for Conservation Key?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we want to do is we want to make science exploration of coral reef environments accessible to all. So I was actually born neurodiverse and I physically cannot dive. And so it's something that really hindered my ability to connect with coral ecosystems, which I'm super passionate about. And I realized, that I became a beach watch instructor for the state of Florida for their beach watch program some years ago. And I realized, we're really limiting the people that can experience these environments. And so, as I mentioned, we reached out to WCS and we got a submersible drone grant from them. And one of the things that we put in our application is we wanted to find a way that not just divers or snorkelers could experience coral ecosystems. And from that, we realized in conjunction with the Bleach Watch program that the state runs, that there was an incredible opportunity for using these submersible drones to not only survey coral reef ecosystems, but because of the way that the drones operate, we can have numerous screens and cameras up so that people on shore can basically do the dive with you, right? And so accessibility was something that was really important to me when we started thinking about, I know I say we because it was me and my husband, when we started thinking about what we wanted to do and where the gaps were in our community with the existing conservation organizations. And also, we wanted to give an opportunity for early career women in science to bring us their own projects, right? So all of our staff is paid except us. So me and my husband as founders and board members, we do not get paid, but every single female that comes out and does a project with us or leads a workshop is their time, and they're paid quite competitively and fairly and honestly. And we came to those numbers after doing a very wide survey of what early career environmental professionals felt was a fair pay raise for their time. And so we give them those experiences. And so recently we partnered up with a scientist who's studying microplastics and their impact on coral reefs. And so we said, do you want to lead a microplastics program for us? And so we built it out with her and she got paid for her time. And that's what she does. And then we have another scientist and researcher who's helping us put together a workshop on parrotfish. A lot of folks don't realize how important parrotfish are to our coral ecosystems. And in South Florida, we have a huge network of folks from the Caribbean diaspora that actually eat parrotfish. And we don't want them to overfish the parrotfish or eat them to extinction, right? So we are building out this toolkit and this workshop that we will then deploy with dive clubs and education centers and libraries at no cost to these communities. And that's just some of the things that we do with Conservation Key aside from coral surveys. So we do the coral surveys pro bono. So whether you might be a scientist or a government agency or another nonprofit or a dive center who basically want to know about the condition of such and such reef. And we'll work with them to go out and survey the reef. And then we take all of that footage and we actually make it open source and we host it on a cloud-based library. So we have had digital artists use our footage at like Ultra Music Festival, or different things like that. And we just give it to them for free. We just ask that they help us spread the word about the work that we're doing.
That's so awesome. You guys are super huge givers.
Yeah.
I think you have really to be in the world.
Right? Yeah, but you got to eat, right? So how are you balancing, giving so much and feeding yourselves and then also just balancing your time? I mean, it sounds like I know that you love the work that you do, but you must take time off from just emails and things. So how are you balancing?
Yeah. That's a great question. So, right now we do ultimately want to be fully employed, obviously, by the nonprofit and be able to dedicate all of our time to the nonprofit and grow it. We've grown slowly but surely since we started in 2019. We are taking a pretty big break this summer because I'm in the process of building my house down here in the Bahamas, and that's taken away a lot of my time and energy. And then a lot of the work that I normally would have done, I've just contracted out and paid, our staff to do it on my behalf, which does cost money because typically I'd do it for free, right? We're very fortunate that we do have a couple of solid donors that have been really supporting us since almost day one, which is very unique. We can always obviously do with more funding, but I think that when you really do what you love and you're good at time management, which is something that I learned from my time in the film industry, you do find a way to kind of balance it all. But I think it's also important, like right now I've had to step away this summer just because, I'm getting my life in order and I'm super excited about it, right? This new chapter in my life. And it's okay to take a break. It's okay to put an away message on your social media and be like, hey guys, we're taking a break for 6 months. We'll be back with some cool stuff in the fall or whatever it may be. And I think that a lot of folks feel that if they're not doing it perfectly, they don't want to do it at all. And while there is definitely some truth to that, I just think, well, even though we're not at the capacity that we'd like to be right now, we're still making an impact and we're still creating opportunities for these young women in science. And that's something that I'm really proud of.
That's so great. And related to that, next question was going to be around imposter syndrome. So I know I deal with this in just working for myself, and people are like, what, you have 4 businesses? Like, they look at me like sideways, like I have 2 heads. How do you approach all of this amazing stuff? You're only in your 30s and you're doing all these things. And, if you let people's thoughts and judgments get to you, imposter syndrome will just take you down. Like, how do you avoid that? Or what are your tools for not going down that hole?
Well, this is definitely something that I'm still learning. I am my own worst enemy for sure. And imposter syndrome is very alive and well in my head, which is terrible. But, one of the things that I think about is, Albert Einstein once said, all I know is that I don't know anything. And if that was inspiring enough for him to say, right, I think he's one of the most brilliant people, right, of the last numerous generations.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that we have to have grace with ourselves because, again, each of us have had our own unique experiences and journeys that have brought us to the moment we're in today. And nobody else will have those exact experience moments that you've had. And there's a lot of value in that. And so while we may have people that we look up to and admire, I think it's really important to meditate on the fact that you are unique and that person's unique. And, however it is that they got there is very unique, but we don't have to be that. We can be our own thing. And that's definitely something that I think about every morning when I wake up. It's like, you know what? I'm doing this. I'm doing me. This is what's working for me now. And I don't need to compare or compete with anyone else. So that's how I've dealt with it. And it's not perfect and I'm still working on it. But yeah, that's the best advice I can give to that.
Yeah. And I think that's really important too, to say that it's never perfect. Doubt can creep in here and there no matter what, right? Like no matter if you are the best person at whatever it is, and it still happens. And it's a spectrum, right? Sometimes we talk about it as like, I defeated imposter syndrome. I will never again have to deal with this. That would be great, but that's not how it works.
Yeah. And, I think that one of the things that is really interesting about our society and our culture is that we're almost made to fear failure. I think that failure can be an incredible gift. I think that sometimes you want to fail. Like when I first started, just very early, young 15-year-old Marilu, right? I wanted to be a film director. I didn't know that there were all these other roles in the film industry that I could kind of fall into. And I tried directing my first student film and it was god awful. It was so bad. It was so terrible. I was so angry and frustrated at myself because I'm like, well, why, I see things in my head, but why can't I execute them? And then I had a mentor at the time who was much, much older and much more established in the film industry. And he's like, I don't think you're a director at all. I think you're a producer. And then as we started talking about what that entailed, because I didn't really understand the role of a producer at the time, I realized like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Yeah. And I feel like I'm very proud of so many of the projects that I've had the opportunity to produce, some of which have gone on to win awards, And if I hadn't had that early taste of failure, I would have never been to where I am today, right? So I think that failure can be a gift.
I totally agree. And I think it's like some of our most compelling stories all have an element of failure in them, right? It's if you learn from failure, then how do you move forward? How do you move on? How do you how do you grow, and be a better person? So, or a better version of yourself, I should say. And I don't know. I think that's kind of fun. Like, storytelling is really important to a lot of what we do. A lot of what our listeners care about is good storytelling. So how have you used that in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. It's definitely multi-layered. One of the things that I feel when we were telling the harmful algal bloom project story for the Surfrider Foundation was we wanted to capture people at all levels who had been impacted by it. So, one was a business owner who lost their business due to the harmful algal blooms and, people not wanting to rent paddleboards or kayaks because the air was toxic. And another one was a gentleman who actually had to send his young children away to Wyoming or Montana, I can't recall exactly, because of the fumes in the air. And I think that, again, I love the differences in us as humans and as people and the perspectives that we each bring. And that's the part of storytelling I've really found compelling. Is I did another video for Surfrider also about the Safer Smaller Ships, Cleaner Ships initiative that happened in the city of Key West, and how our Florida legislature basically invalidated the vote of the people of Key West over that issue. Which was incredibly incendiary. And so one of the ways that we approached that story was to tell it from the perspective of a business owner, of a fisherman who, relies on fishing to nourish his family and has done so generationally in the city of Key West, and how these cruise ships impacted that. And so I think that, storytelling is so interesting because we can also one idea that I have in my head that I'd love to execute in the next few years is actually telling the story of parrotfish. Yeah. They're not just beautiful, but I feel like we talk about all of these animals that are critical to coral reef environments. And I feel that we all sometimes forget about parrotfish and, how important they are. And they're so enigmatic, right? And they're also just so charming in their appearance. And I think that, biologically, they also go through these incredible metamorphoses that make for great storytelling. So I don't know. I think nature is probably the best canvas that we have. We can't write a better story than the one nature is unfolding before us every day.
Oh, yeah. And, what is it? Parrotfish are like the sound of the reef, and you put your ears to hear them, they're a little munching away and doing really good work for the reef. So, I mean, I love that. It's really great. Really, really cool. So, I mean, all right. So what are the keys to a compelling story? How do we tell a story about parrotfish or whatever it is? Like, how do you grab those elements to get people engaged?
I think folks are always going to be naturally drawn to drama, right? So identifying what is the issue or what is the problem, right? Whether it's dirty waters or the lesser told story of the parrotfish, right? Who are also facing their own challenges with fishing and as our coral environments obviously decay and decline in health. So I think that I always try to start with what's the problem? What's the problem? Let's show that problem, right? Because that's going to be your drama aspect of the program or the film or whatever it may be. And then you always want to end on a high note. Like, what's the solution? Who are the people that are trying to make a difference? And I think that there's also a lot of incredible drama in those stories too. Like, what drove someone to want to, go to Tallahassee or go to the Capitol and meet with their elected officials and make an impassioned plea for XYZ change. So I think that that's typically how I approach storytelling. Is I want to see what's the problem and who are the people at the heart of the problem. And between those two things, we're sure to get some good footage.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting you say ending on a high note. And that reminded me of, I think one of the Our Planet or Planet Earth documentaries that they did, where they did not do that, where they were kind of like, oh, well, we're screwed. Everything's awful. And there was an outcry about that. And like, what's the solution? There was no solution. It was almost like a study or a story that was left untold. So how do you avoid that kind of thing when you're doing some kind of the work that you do, or missing a key element to something that people want?
Yeah, well, I think there's always a call to action. And I think that also, I'm a very metrics focused person. I love data and I love metrics. And one of the things that we've learned from programming in the last 10, 15 years is that when you just give people doom and gloom, they're completely turned off by it. It doesn't inspire them. Like for a long time, people thought like, well, if folks see how terrible it is, that's going to make them get up off their couch and, stop being a slacktivist and go out and do something. But we actually learned that's not true at all. Right. So I think that giving people, there's so many things that we can do every day to solve some of the problems that we're seeing in our planet and our environment every day. Each of us have the power to make simple changes and enact change and be the change. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but there are different ways that we can take action. And I think that that's where the sweet spot is. It's giving folks something realistic that they can do. Not everybody feels comfortable writing to their elected official or showing up at a town hall meeting, but maybe they feel okay talking to their local grocery store manager about plastic bags or, whatever the issue at hand may be or whatever they're passionate about. And so I think that giving folks easy steps that they can take into their own lives. Sometimes it's donate if they can. Sometimes it's just share this video with someone else. I think that helps you end on a high note. And I think that helps people feel like they have some accountability and they can make the problem their own and take some sort of action that will be measurable.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great advice. Yeah. Because, like I say, if you give people like a path forward, you can still hit them with all this doom and gloom and then say, hey, but here's how you can help and how we can avoid it. And yeah, like I say, a call to action almost is quite wonderful. And you have on your LinkedIn, I love that you lead by example. So, I mean, we're kind of talking about it a little bit, but what does that mean to you?
I think that for me, when I entered the film industry, it was a very different world than it is today. I'm sure we've all heard about, obviously, the Me Too movement. And a lot of that started with a lot of even the experiences that I had in the film industry. And it was very cutthroat. And I realized very early on that I didn't want to be that kind of leader and I didn't want to run that kind of set. And I brought that into my environmental and conservation career. I didn't want to be somebody who felt the need to embarrass or belittle others to prove a point. I think everything is a teachable moment, even for myself. There are things that I learn every day, and I try to make the goal of learning something every day. Again, going back to that Albert Einstein quote, right? Yeah. And so I try to lead by example by, no question is too small. No question is dumb. No question is inappropriate if there's real intent of learning behind it, right? And I try to always create conducive, inspiring zones and areas and opportunities for the people around me. I want folks to feel empowered when they come to an activation that my organization has held. I want the instructors and my staff to feel that they are in control, that they are empowered, that it is a safe space for learning and making mistakes. And those are the things that I really focus on as a leader. Even when I worked at Surfrider, I was a paid staff person, but everyone I was working with was a volunteer. And so I really tried to approach every day with compassion and empathy and patience. And again, making everything that I can a teachable moment for them and for myself.
That's really great. We talk about role models a lot on here because that's my jam. And so appreciate your experience and sharing those thoughts. And I think that what you're doing, just everything that you're doing is, somebody listening might say, oh, cool, I'm going to give that a shot too. So I love it. But now it is time for Field Notes. It's our part of the show where we talk to our guests about your memorable moments doing the work that you do. And so if you're listening and you'd like to share a story with us, use the hashtag Field Notes and we'll try to read it on a future episode. But you've spent time in different various types of fields, not necessarily environmental ones, and that's okay. So we just really want some experiences putting yourself out there. And you have any stories to share with us that might be interesting?
Oh my gosh, I have a really embarrassing, funny one that my husband is going to kill me for sharing. But
love it. Let's go.
Oh, we have to hear it. Yeah.
So when we started taking out, we have two drones. One is a little more rudimentary than the other. And when we first got our action-packed super drone, as I like to call it, her name is Calypso. She's a beautiful piece of machinery. Right. When we first took her out, we were very fortunate to have a partnership with the International Seakeeper Society, who actually brokered all of the charters for us to take the vessel out or the drone out on a vessel. And one day we had a Nat Geo Explorer come out with us who wanted to capture what we were doing and, really tell her public about what we were doing. She was super stoked. And we warned her, and I'm like, we're going to get seasick. When you drive the drone, obviously the boat is moving and it's doing its own thing. But when you're driving the drone, you're also trying to stay very still because it's on a tether, right? So the drone is in the water. You can't get in the water with the controller because the controller can't get wet, which is a serious design flaw, by the way. That's a story for another episode. And so we were doing so well and we were so proud of ourselves. And, we were trying to like be strong-willed folks with this very impressive individual who was out on this boat and field trip with us. And right towards the end, we were like, oh my God, we did it. We didn't get seasick. And 5 seconds later, my husband got seasick. I got seasick. The poor explorer got seasick. We got the whole ship seasick. And we were just like so embarrassed. But you know what? That's a part of life. And now we laugh about it. And again, we just washed our faces in the sea salt and kept on trucking. And we got some good footage that day. So it was a win-win at the end.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, that's why we love it. We all have those moments in the field that we're like, oh God, I'm never telling anybody about this. And then you tell everyone.
Yeah. And you never be the person who's like, everyone else is getting sick. That's hilarious. You guys are really struggling because you're next. You're next.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. But you and your seasick husband have decided to move to the Bahamas, which you already mentioned. But tell us just a little bit more about that, because also just in line with what we've been talking about, taking leaps and making some bold decisions, what is involved in deciding I may be considering this myself. What do you sit down and think about and talk about and then get to an agreement that, yes, we want to leave the country and we're going to do it permanently and, pull up stakes, and how do you both agree on the location, all that good stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know when the conversation started about expat life. We got married in 2017 and we didn't have a formal wedding. We eloped. And then what we would have used on a wedding, we actually used to travel for a whole year. So we got to have all these cool travel experiences. We went to Cuba, we went to Costa Rica, we went to Italy. And somewhere along these travels, we really started just realizing there's a lot of the world that we want to see and experience on a much deeper level than just, spending a month here or spending a week here, things like that. And so we did start traveling quite intentionally with the purpose of finding either an expat community or just a place where we felt that, we belonged. And so my husband is half Hawaiian. We looked at Hawaii for a while, but with some of the obviously cultural impact of the area. And, I myself am not Hawaiian. He's only partially Hawaiian. We didn't feel that the community was really open to that. We respected that. And that's actually why we scratched it off the list. But I knew I wanted it to be somewhere tropical because I wanted to continue my coral reef research. I wanted to continue the drone work. And last summer, actually, in 2022 of June, we came to the Abacos in the Bahamas, and I had never been here. I had spent a lot of time in the Bahamas growing up. My father loved cruising, him being from Cuba. And so, the temperature and the environment is very similar here than it was in Cuba. And so he exiled in the 1980s and never returned. But I think he was kind of always looking for a place that felt like home. So I spent a lot of time down here. And when we came here to the Abacos, we came on a day trip to a little settlement called Little Harbor. And we just knew. I really can't explain it. We both just looked at each other as we drove into the harbor area and we're like, no way. This is not real. And we fell in love with it and started doing our homework and started looking obviously at the immigration laws and things like that, and realized that it was actually really feasible for us. And so we lived in West Palm Beach at the time. We had a residence there. And in April of this year, we sold it all. We sold the house. We sold the Jeep. I still miss the Jeep, I will admit. And put all the money in the bank and decided to build a small little cottage here, about 1,000 square feet here in the Bahamas. So, there was a lot of factors that made it very easy for us. We didn't have children. We don't have children. That's, we weren't worried about schools and school districts and things like that. So we're kind of blessed in the sense that it's just us and we can pick up and go. And also the Bahamas has they're very open to foreign residents and foreign homeowners building homes here, buying homes here. So immigration wise, that worked out in our favor as well. And then, it's a 40-minute plane ride to West Palm where I still have family. So that was also a factor, right? Like my father's no longer with us, but my mother is getting older. We wanted to make sure that if she did need care, that we were close enough to be able to get to her if something happened. And so there was a lot of deciding factors. And I think that anyone who's considering expat life, you're going to have to think about that. If schools are important, if you want to homeschool, if you have children, what the tax laws are in that country, what immigration looks like. There's definitely a lot of factors to decide. But for us, the checklist was easy: tropical, somewhere we can continue our work, and close proximity enough to the United States that we can get back to if we need to.
Yeah, very cool. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I hope your house turns out great. Maybe you'll send us a picture or something. But we are running out of time. So is there anything else you want to talk about that maybe we didn't get to yet?
No, I just want to thank you guys so much for your time and your listeners. And I hope that if you're considering taking the dive and moving careers, that you can do it. Just put yourself out there, and there's nothing better than a life well lived, in the sense that you really get to do what it is that you're passionate about. There's nothing worse than looking back 20 years and thinking, oh, I should have done that. Just do it. Just do it. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Yeah. It doesn't work out. That's okay. You have a great story. I promise that.
For sure.
Sure.
That's awesome. Thank you. And finally, where can people get in touch with you?
So you can reach us if you want to learn more about the coral work that we do with the drones, or the programs that we're going to be offering in the new year in 2024. You can visit us at www.conservationkey, spelled KEY.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Thanks.
That's our show. Thank you, Marilu, for joining us today. And please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.
See you, everybody.